There you go.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Ask Dr. Dansinger. This is going to be a great show. You want to hear success stories from all of his work that it is, in fact, possible to reverse diabetes and improve your artery health on your own with just subtle changes in your diet. We're going to give you some incredible inspiration as Dr. Danzinger shares these cases. Remember, if you are in New Hampshire, if you're in Massachusetts, if you're in New York, Minnesota, Virginia, or Florida, and you have Medicare or Medicare Advantage PPO plans, you can definitely take advantage of his diabetes reversal services, his services to help you improve your artery health, all through diet, covered by insurance. So definitely visit his website, diabetesreversalpartners.com. With that, Dr. Danzinger, I'm ready for your first case. I can't wait to hear about these success stories.
Okay, great. Thanks, Kim. I would love to present some cases today, so here we go. I'll share my screen.
Oh, look at Laura.
Well, here's a success story. This is the case of Laura. She's an 81-year-old New Yorker, and this lady is full of life. She is a retired teacher. She's active every day. She's out there in the dating world. She has 2 children and 5 grandchildren, which are her inspiration. And unfortunately, she's been hit with cardiovascular disease. And years ago, she had a mild heart attack and has 1 stent in place, and she takes rosuvastatin to lower her cholesterol. But she came to me less than a year ago because she was diagnosed with diabetes at that time, and that sort of startled her. And she knew she had some pre-diabetes, but she didn't take it as seriously at that time. But once it reached the point of type 2 diabetes, she realized that she wanted to take it up a notch. And so she had found me and became a patient. And as I got to know her, I realized that she had thought she was eating pretty healthily, but what she didn't recognize is that all that bread, I mean, she's Laura's a bread lover. And unfortunately, it was holding her back. And she hadn't fully really, she'd been eating bread all her life and had thought that was a healthy thing to do. But unfortunately, she accepted that the bread was not as healthy as she had always thought. And,
And Dr. Danziger, I was just
sugar,
reading
yes.
a study on the rise of colorectal cancer. And one of the key factors in the rise in colorectal cancer that they are attributing is the use of processed grains. And, saying that was a contributing factor to it. So really, you got to be careful with some of these breads that are out there on the mainstream.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially these low fiber, highly refined. So, after getting to know her, most of her diet was actually pretty healthy. She's a real fish lover and likes fruits and vegetables, and doesn't eat a lot of fatty meats, but the bread was holding her back. So, and even though she was doing some exercise, she was open to really doubling that. And over the course of 9 months, she lost 20 pounds with me, and her A1C went from 6.7% in the diabetic range to 5.9. And she was able to discontinue her metformin and decrease her blood pressure and cholesterol medication. And she is a very happy lady, and she just feels lighter on her feet. And she's in a real positive cycle mentally and physically. And so, Laura's been a tremendous success story and a source of inspiration to me as well.
Well, what did you do to help her with her bread addiction? Because we get
Yeah.
that question. Patients tell me that it is their non-negotiable. And I say, that is going to be the number one thing you do need to change. I know it made a difference for my dad, and he has now switched to an Udi's ancient grain bread, gluten-free. And and they're smaller slices too, if that's a contributing factor to helping him reduce his A1C.
Yeah.
But how did you help her? What did you replace
Yeah,
the bread
great
with?
question. Yeah, there's different strokes for different folks. In her case, it wasn't so much a matter of switching to a different, bread. It was just eating it, indulging less often. And so she just, instead of eating bread, 7 days a week, she eats it 1 day a week, and so she just eats her salads and her soups and her fish without bread anymore. And she just kind of, in her case, she was able to sort of make I mean, she's a strong-willed lady. And she just said, oh, is bread really that big of a problem? Is that what's holding me back? Okay, I'll eat it less often, So for her, that was the trick. For other people, though, it's a problem. And, they're addicted to sandwiches. And
Yeah.
how can you eat a sandwich without bread? Well, there are ways to do that. And so,
Oh, there are great ways. You can actually make a high protein avocado bread really, really quickly, and it stores really well in the freezer. So you can take it out and just stick it in the toaster oven. Also, the cauliflower bread. I mean, I think it's just eggs, cauliflower, water, and a little bit of cheese that you can put in there. Maybe if you really need it, maybe some sort of binder, a natural binder that you could put in there. But the cheese, cauliflower, riced cauliflower, and water. We've been able to make buns for our portobello mushroom sandwiches. I think I've talked about that before. And
yeah,
then my
yeah,
other pick that has helped my dad has been on Amazon. They have these coconut wraps, and it's just a few ingredients, including my favorite are the coconut turmeric wraps. And I've turned my dad on to wraps versus sandwiches. And so when I make him his tuna fish, or I make him an egg sandwich or something, I'll always actually use these wraps, and he loves it. He's gotten really used to it. So that's an option as well.
yeah, those are great examples. For my patients, two winners have been these egg life wraps that are made
Oh,
mainly of egg whites. I personally like those, and so I'll use that instead of bread for low fat meats, for example. Um, and then wasa crackers, I think, are a pretty good option for, it's the size and shape of a graham cracker, and it's somewhere between a graham cracker and a piece of cardboard. If you could marry a graham cracker and a piece of cardboard together, you'd get something that's a little bit like a rye crisp, but with fewer calories and
but
less.
it's only the conduit, right? You can, dip it in hummus. You can add a little
Right.
avocado. You can put a little tuna salad on it. Add a little Mrs. Dash if you need some sort of salty flavor, right?
Exactly. So the lesson here in this case of Laura is, it's never too late to turn things around. It's never too, she's 81 and she feels like she's got 20 good years of life, and she's not throwing in the towel and letting diabetes get the best of her. She's going to be proactive, turn around, and she's going to use food and exercise as her medicine.
Perfect. Great
I've got another
case.
one for you. Let's see if I can. I'm having trouble advancing my screen.
Usually just the space bar.
Yeah, I'm clicking that. There we go.
There you go.
All right. Here's another success story. Donnie. He's a 59-year-old who lives in Northern Virginia. He's a computer programmer, and he's divorced. He has an adult daughter who lives nearby. And he was frustrated when I first met him because he was trying to lose weight. He was at 220 pounds, and he'd been on weekly Ozempic shots for a while, and he just felt stuck. And he was really down in the dumps. And he just didn't know how to get off of that plateau. And also, he'd had diabetes for like a decade, and the nerves in his feet were affected, peripheral neuropathy, so some stinging and discomfort, and he didn't want to have to take a lot of more medications, and he just was felt like he was going, stuck. And so, as I got to know him, I realized that, he's a type of guy who loves meat, cheese, and eggs, but he'd never really tried a low carb eating strategy. And, when we talked about it, he kind of got excited and he said, I've heard of people, um, losing weight, and my doctor never really brought up this type of eating style, and I said, let's give it a month and I'll teach you how to do it. And I said, there's many good eating strategies out there, but for someone like you who likes meat, cheese, and eggs, let's give it a try. And he just took right to it, and it was very, it happened very quickly that he got the scale moving, and then he was in a positive cycle. And so I've been working with him for a year, and he got his weight from 220 down to his goal weight of 175, and he's thrilled. And not every patient is going to get all the way down to their goal weight, and sometimes um the weight doesn't come off nearly as easy. But when you get the right eating strategy matched up with the right person, it can be like a marriage made in heaven. And his A1C dropped as the weight came down. So, his A1C was 8.9. He was almost at 9. And I would give that, like a D as a letter grade. And now, it's 6.7. And he's been able to avoid, insulin shots and additional medications. And so as he got lighter on his feet, he was able to do more physical activity, and he started getting into basketball. And he's another example of a success story. And now we're really just working on maintenance. And so the eating strategy becomes a little less strict. It starts to liberalize to a wider range of vegetables and some fruits. And so I'll continue to work with Donnie.
I love that you customize things, but I see a trend throughout, the cases that you present, in that all of them are low carb. Low carb seems to be a key ingredient for success.
So I have my best luck keeping the carbohydrates moderate, mostly in the around 100 grams per day range. Now Donnie was like at 20 to 30 grams a day, and um, it 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 some of my patients are actually on quite a bit of carb as long as they can keep the fat low. And so there's a range. There's definitely a range. But the vast
It's just
majority of my
customizing it.
patients the vast majority of my patients are steering clear of starchy foods for the most part, and really focusing on fruits and vegetables and healthy proteins. So yes.
Anyway, when you say fat, low fat, you mean making sure that you're staying away from the bad fats.
Yes, absolutely. So to get away with a lot of whole grains, you really need to keep your calories low by keeping the healthy fats to a minimum. And so that's when it becomes super important. I think, when you're eating a
Oh,
lot of whole
interesting.
grains, it becomes very important to make sure that any dairy products are fat free, and that any, poultry or meat is super lean. And when you're eating eggs, it's mainly the whites and not yolks. And so I think as the starch goes up, even the whole grain, one needs to get even more vigilant about unhealthy fat from meat and dairy in order to make a high carb whole grain eating strategy work. And so, Dr. Atkins would say you can't eat carbs with your fat. And Dr. Ornish, who's, low-fat vegetarian, the opposite, would say don't eat fat with your carbs. But really, I think they're saying the same thing. It's when you mix the two together in excess that you really is a recipe for disaster.
But that's why it's really important that individuals get a customized approach for their situation, because there is so
Yeah.
much to consider. We end up on our YouTube channel with people that come in and they have their own opinions, and when they hear things like no yolks and you're completely off base here on this or that or whatever, they're not taking into consideration that there are a lot of factors that should come into play when choosing the right diet for your particular situation. And that's why I think it's important for a patient to work with a doctor like you, who has this breadth and depth in your experience and can take everything into consideration to customize it for the individual.
Absolutely. I would say to use only low carb or only low fat or only, something right in the middle of those is you're missing half of the you're missing half of the options. And so I believe in the whole spectrum, the whole rainbow of eating strategies, and there's no one best color, just like there's no one best diet.
And
But
what's
for
the
an
best diet,
individual, there
Dr.
probably
Dansinger?
is. I'm
The
sorry, go
best
ahead.
diet is the one you stick with, right?
Yes, absolutely.
And what are the lessons from Donnie's case?
Um, I think that um, the main lessons here are, all of us sometimes feel stuck in a rut when it comes to, making progress toward our health goal, and sometimes putting yourself in the position of being pushed or coached can really be the only way to get out of a rut. And sometimes with the right person and the right coach and the right plan, um, dramatic changes can happen. And so be open to coaching, even though it takes bravery to put yourself in a
Mhm.
position to be nudged.
Okay, next case.
Okay, let's see if I can. I don't know how when I press, I'm having trouble forwarding. So when I press the space bar, it just didn't quite. I'm going to try again.
That case was really incredible with Donnie, and it's something that we hear all the time. And if your diet's not under control, your diabetes can lead to that peripheral neuropathy that you can see that Donnie was experiencing there. And it can also lead, for those of you who may be just tuning in here and just looking at these success stories because you want to reverse your diabetes and improve your artery health. Type 2 diabetes can lead to artery blockages, particularly in the small, fragile vessels below the knee. So it's really important to get your diabetes under control, because even one sugar molecule can end up causing damage and wreaking havoc on your artery walls, leading to inflammation, leading to plaque buildup in your arteries, causing these blockages. And in worst cases, and we're seeing more and more of it today, we're seeing people on deck for amputation. And it's so sad because it is so easy to actually reverse diabetes working with someone like Dr. Dansinger, finding the right diet for you.
Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. Here's another success story. This is Scott. He's a 75-year-old who lives in southern Florida. He's a retired engineer, and he's married and has a very supportive wife. He has two children and four grandchildren that he wishes he could see more, but definitely wants to give them the gift of his good health. So he wants to be around to meet his great grandchildren someday. So he's had type 2 diabetes for 6 years and has had lifelong obesity, and he has high cholesterol and high blood pressure as a result. And I met him 2 years ago when he started my coaching program, and over the course of 2 years, he's been able to stick to his eating plan pretty closely. And so this is a patient who's on, he likes all foods. He's not a particularly picky eater. He was eating plenty of starch though when we started, and he happens to be a real rice lover. And so we backed off on starchy foods, including rice, and his wife does a lot of the cooking. And so, I included her. And over the course of 2 years, he's been able to keep 50 pounds off. And he got his weight from 240 pounds to 190 pounds. And yes, he would like to take off 5 or even 10 more, but he's pretty happy with this 50-pound weight loss that he's been able to maintain. And in parallel to the weight loss, his A1C fell from 7.8 to 6.3, and he's been able to reduce but not fully eliminate his diabetes medication and his medication for blood pressure and cholesterol. So it's just another I just love having a relationship with this person who's stuck with it for 2 years. And as a doctor, it's really gratifying to work with a patient like Scott, who's, been concerned about, now that he's in his retirement years, he wants to really make his health a top priority. And he would consider his job right now is taking care of his health and his family.
I love this. What are some of the alternatives for rice for those who absolutely can't seem to get rice out of their diet,
Yeah.
rice and other starchy foods?
Yeah, great question. The number one alternative, I think, is cauliflower rice. And
Mm.
so as I taught him and his wife really embraced it and figured out how to make it good. And so cauliflower rice is, maybe not everyone knows, it's just cauliflower in the shape of rice. And
Mhm.
I've tried to make it myself from a head of cauliflower, and it was a big mess. I got raw cauliflower all over the kitchen, and ever since my one attempt to make it at home, I started buying it. And I like to get mine at Trader Joe's, but most supermarkets have it either in the fresh or the frozen section. But that's not the only alternative to um, to rice. I would love to hear if anyone else out there has found any alternatives to rice or even noodles or other types of similar starchy things that we put, as the base of a meal.
Yeah, definitely go ahead and put that in comments if you have suggestions. If you've been someone who's been addicted to rice and what your options were, what you have found to replace it and to satisfy you. I know Dr. Dansinger, you've talked about the root vegetable that comes in all shapes and sizes. What's it called? The cognac noodles. Thank you. Diana's in our live studio audience. It's called cognac noodles, Konjac, and you can find it in the produce department. And when Diana mentioned it to me that you had suggested it to her, I went out and it comes in fettuccine noodles, it comes in angel hair, it comes in even little specks that
Yeah,
look
like
like
rice.
rice.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's right. So most of my patients who are rice lovers who got used to the cauliflower rice, that's been the winner for them. But yes, there's rice made out of konjac. There's also rice made out of hearts of palm. Company
Oh
called
yeah.
Palmini makes rice shaped um, out of hearts of palm. And I've heard of people using shaved, putting carrots, grating carrots to
Mm.
make sort of a rice shape. You could do that with other vegetables as well. And
And I
noodles,
mean,
when
for
it comes
noodles,
to
zucchini noodles
zucchini
are
noodles,
are
yes.
amazing.
Hmm.
You could even
Or
buy them if you're lazy. You can buy them in the freezer.
yes, yeah.
Easy
So
to get.
and of course spaghetti squash
Oh
noodles,
yeah. Oh, I love spaghetti squash, but
right?
isn't that a starchy vegetable that you have to still limit or no?
So spaghetti squash is probably about half as starchy as pasta. So if you,
That's still better.
yeah, zucchini noodles would be less starchy than butternut than spaghetti squash noodles. So they're somewhere in between. Most of my patients can get away with that a little bit.
And so, what are the final lessons on this
Yeah,
case?
the final lessons are, it's heartbreaking when we see someone in their retirement years who can't fully enjoy their retirement because they allowed their either their work or just their life obligations to interfere too much with their health. And even at the age of 75, Scott and thousands of others like him have made their health a top project in their retirement. And you know if you've got teamwork between spouses, that can also go a very long way, and that was crucially important in Scott's case as well. And so the moral of the story is, with the right eating plan and a moderate amount of exercise and a partnership between spouses, the sky's the limit, and there can be a dramatic transformation when you put your mind to it and have a good plan.
One more case?
Yes, let me see if I can. Okay. I saved Sabrina for last. So Sabrina is 67. She's still working. She's in the Boston area, and she's a legal assistant. She's a widow. Unfortunately, her husband had died of a sudden heart attack a decade earlier, and it was just heartbreaking for her and for her three children and grandchildren to have lost her beloved husband. So really, long before his life expectancy should have been over. And she was concerned for her own heart and her own arteries. She'd had diabetes, type 2 diabetes, for 15 years. She had gotten it in middle age. And she was especially concerned about dialysis, and her kidneys had been gradually um, decreasing. According to her nephrologist, had been measuring her kidney function year after year during the previous decade, and it had slipped down to about 25 or 30% kidney function. And then she reached out to me, and our number one priority was to save her kidneys and prolong the amount of time that she could be dialysis free, maybe the rest of her life off of, staying away from dialysis. But without my help, she might have only been 1 or 2 years away from dialysis. And so we've been working together for a year and a half, and I gave her an eating strategy that was a good fit for what she likes. So there are certain vegetables that she does and doesn't like, and certain fruits that she does and doesn't like. And she was afraid to eat fruit, and I said, no, in your case, I think we can do okay with the fruit. But let's keep it in moderation. But I don't want to take fruit away because you're a real fruit lover. And so she'd focus on berries and oranges and clementines, which she liked. And over the course of a year and a half, she has lost 30 pounds, and hopefully she can keep going just a little bit more. She's about 10 pounds away from her goal weight, and her A1C came down from 8.1% to 6.5%. And most importantly, she was able to discontinue her insulin, and she was ready to increase her insulin when we first started. But with the right eating strategy that was focused on vegetables and protein, she was able to gradually decrease her insulin, and we monitored her blood sugar with her continuous glucose monitor. And she was able to discontinue, and I think the insulin was making her hungry. And so as she decreased her insulin and got off of it, I think it really helped her um, avoid excess calories, and we were able to stabilize her kidney function. So we haven't seen any loss any progression of her kidney, abnormalities during the year and a half that we've been working together. And so it's been a thrill to have another success story like Sabrina.
And, one of our in-studio audience members, Anna, she says, I heard that once on insulin, you're permanently on insulin. And I think this is a really good example that it turns out that's not necessarily the case for a type 2.
Absolutely. And so just to be clear, Sabrina is not, her diabetes isn't in remission. She doesn't have normal blood sugar without medications. I mean, that was the case with the first patient, really, got her pre-diabetes into remission. And a number of my patients are able to be, um, free of diabetes medications with normal, or near normal A1C levels. In Sabrina's case, she one of the things that did help was the Manjaro, and that is recommended for, a GLP-1 is recommended in patients with who have, kidney loss of kidney function, and I think that between the weight loss and the Manjaro, that combination I think allowed her to discontinue the insulin, and so better to take a once a week injection than and twice a day shots. And so I think that was a part of the solution, but more importantly was I think just getting her on the right eating strategy and providing the structure and accountability of weekly video visits that my approach provides.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dansinger. We really appreciate your time. Successful cases. And again, if you want to learn more about Dr. Dansinger and how he helps patients, if you're in New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Virginia, New York, Minnesota, or Florida, and you have Medicare and Medicare Advantage PPO plans, definitely go to diabetesreversalpartners.com to get some help. Meantime, like this video because more people are more likely to see this video if you like it. It's just how YouTube works. Also, subscribe to our channels. This channel is youtube.com/the @ the way to my heart. And also, if you're on Dr. Danzinger's channel, or make sure you go and subscribe to his channel. It's again, youtube.com/the @ Michael Dansinger, MD. Thanks everyone for joining us. I hope you have a great week. And if you want to join our live studio audience every week and ask your questions, make sure you email